Welcome to episode 4 of the AmericanNoise podcast as we go in depth inside the Los Angeles Wildcats, the supposed second best team in the Western Division. While the Renegades are way out in front and the Dragons seem to be bringing up the rear, the Roughnecks and Wildcats seem to be dueling for the second spot in the division. Of course, week 1, if the Wildcats beat the Roughnecks on the road, that will set a long way for the Roughnecks to come anywhere close back in the conversation. Losing at home to a divisional team in week 1 is not what you want to do. If the Wildcats beat the Renegades in week 2 after beating the Roughnecks, you can probably put them as the top team in that division. If they go in 1-1, that's fine. If they go in 2, it's time to sound the alarm bells, because that means there's 2 teams that are likely better than them in the long run, and only the top 2 in each division makes it to the playoffs. But there's another issue with the Wildcats, and that is the lack of fan support. Despite the work of Heather Brooks' cast, they're not exactly a popular team. In fact, the Wildcats have just barely crossed over the 20K follower threshold. Meanwhile, the Renegades are in the 30s to 40s. Battlehawks are already in the 40s. But the Wildcats seem to be lagging behind in everything. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It just seems like they're here simply to fulfill a ratings TV deal. They are the wild card of the league. And who would be better to be a wild card for this team as a head coach than Winston Moss? Because the interesting thing is that all of the other 7 coaches in this league have come from offensively minded backgrounds. They're coordinators or position coaches on the offense. But Winston Moss is different. He is a defensive coach. He's the only head coach in the league that is defensively minded. He'll have to win chess matches against 7 of the top offensive minds in the game. He cannot out-offense them. He was the assistant head coach on the Packers under Mike McCarthy for the last few seasons in his tenure. Now he's in the XFL as a true head coach and the general manager of the Wildcats. And this isn't only the first time that LA's had a long history of professional teams. Of course, possibly the most famous is in fact the LA Extreme, who I guess this makes the Wildcats the defending XFL champions, if you really want to acknowledge it. Do you really want to acknowledge it? I don't really want to acknowledge that. That's not good. But Los Angeles Wildcats are going to be one of the most crowded teams when it comes to other teams playing in their city, competing attention. Again, they are kind of the black sheep of the league here solely for TV revenue, which kind of stinks. In fact, some would say that if they had gotten a franchise in Oakland, except for the fact that every person on the government in that city seems to hate sports with a passion, and if the fleet hadn't taken up bribes incidents in the AAF, perhaps Los Angeles wouldn't even be in this league. But they are. And they are the wild card for the entire league. The team that could try to steal it all for everyone else. So, if the Wildcats are going to be the black sheep, does that mean they're most hated? They're actually kind of the underdogs. Now, the Dragons, who we'll cover very soon, have the most ticket support, but possibly the worst team. The Wildcats have the weakest fan support in general, but have a far better team. It's kind of unfair, you would say in some cases, but that's just the way that it is so far. So, if they're going to be alone, then, well, they're going to be alone together, as Winston Moss has hired offensive coordinator Norm Chow to help oversee his offense. An excellent hire. Pepper Johnson will be the defensive coordinator. Both of these coordinators actually are position coaches. Chow will take over the quarterback role to help Josh Johnson in the backups, and Pepper Johnson will also coach the linebackers specifically. Again, Josh Johnson is the starter, and he was supposed to be the AAF's crown jewel quarterback until the Redskins snapped him up. Now, after being got in the supplemental draft, he beat out Luis Perez for the starting job, and Perez got traded. So already, one franchise tier 1 starter has proven that it's not a sure thing to start because Perez is out of here. Josh Johnson is now the man in charge. Chad Kanoff and Jalen McClendon will back up Johnson. Of course, Johnson has some local ties. He played for the University of San Diego. In the running back position, Elijah Hood will carry the main load. Larry Rose and Juwan Harris will be backing him up. Trey McBride is going to be the main receiver in the unit, followed by Kermit Whitfield, Nelson Spruce, and Jalen Green. Yeah, actually, Snead from Blackmill's also there. Brendan Barnes is the only tight end currently on the roster. There is a weak spot there. The question is if that will be exploited. Again, XFL is not very big on tight ends with its style of play. Fred Lorena will be the only center for the team on the roster for week 1, just like the Renegades. He will be the lone anchor. Surrounding him on the strong side in the left area are Khalil McKenzie and Storm Norton. On the right side, Jalen Robinson and Nico Siragusa will mainly start to cover up the right end of the offensive lineman area. Nico Siragusa has also got the local ties along with Josh Johnson, having attended the University of San Diego. Of course, the big X factor on the team is on the defensive line. One Sean Oakman likely to start at right defensive end. And boy, he's had a rough patch. Hailed as one of the XFL's top players, he was cut by the Wildcats near the start of training camp after some supposed locker room issues. But apparently whoever had those issues with was gone, and Oakman has come back and will now lead the defensive line. So yeah, apparently, if your guy gets cut, he can always come back. Cedric Reed and Montori Hughes will likely start beside him. The linebacking core is led by Anthony Johnson, Will Smith, Willie Mays. We got 2 Wills on the line. And Harlan Miller. The secondary is a mismatch of Lance Dunlap. Yep, he's back. Wait, it's Jalen Dunlap. Sorry, man. I kept thinking of Lance Dunbar, who's with the Renegades. Jalen Dunlap, Harlan Miller, Jack Tocho, and Jeroy Copeland will be the main Wildcat players. So, the LA season will be very much a front-heavy schedule to determine how good this team is. Well, the Renegades are likely going to be 3-1 or 4-0, and if they're not after those first 4 games against somewhat easy opponents, they're in trouble. In the case of the Wildcats, their front schedule is very, very important. They have both Dallas teams at the very start of the season. Roughnecks and Renegades. And they play home against the Renegades in week 2, but they're at the Roughnecks. This is a very important slate, to be honest, because if they lose to both these teams, especially the Renegades at home, they're showing that they're not a division contender. If they win both of these, it's pretty likely the Wildcats are going to end up winning the division. They're 2-0. They've won the 2 biggest games against probably their biggest opponents. It just makes sense. But yeah, that's pretty much the schedule for the start of the season. And they also play the Dragons in week 6 and 9. By that point, the Dragons might already be out of contention if the odd bet is holding up. Well, this was episode 4, probably the shortest one so far. It's under 10 minutes. But yeah, that's pretty much all of the Western Division except the lone weak team. The team that truly no one believes in, and that's the Seattle Dragons. We'll cover that soon. Finally, I almost forgot, but the Wildcats do already have some odds like the rest of the team in the league. Wildcats are at plus 550 according to Bovada, which puts them at 4th. Again, wildcard contender, that's 250 over the Roughnecks, 550 over the Dragons, but 250 on the money line behind the Renegades. FoxBet also has them at 4th at 550. 550 again on PointsBet USA, but they're in 5th. But that's not a problem because they're still the second best team in the West. 250 over the Roughnecks and 650 over the Dragons. Again, Wildcats are held expected to be the second best team in the Western Division. 4th best team in the league, maybe? They are at 5-1, tied with the Vipers on SBD. But yep, it seems the West is very much Renegades are going to be the likely champion. Wildcats will bring the rear in the wild card and face them at Dallas in Week 11, likely. Again, this could all change on a dime. But Let's see. What else? Oh, yeah. The Roughnecks in third. If they beat the Wildcats in week 1 at home, though, there's a chance they could pull out something. And then finally, the Dragons all the way in 8th. Poor guys. That stinks too because they have the best fan support, and that's who we'll be covering next. See you then. This has been the American Noise Podcast.